Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I am your host, David Hiltz, and we have an excellent webinar in store for you today as we discuss World Restart a Heart Day and October as Sudden Cardiac Arrest Awareness Week. The mission of the Citizen CPR Foundation is to save lives from sudden cardiac arrest by stimulating effective community, professional, and citizen action. Through our community-based approach, the foundation intends to guide, empower, and enable communities to leverage 6 key strategies at the local and regional levels, including strengthening local stakeholder collaboration, encouraging data collection, analysis, and dissemination, facilitating the implementation of life-saving strategies, promoting public education and training, improving the delivery of high-quality resuscitation and post-arrest care, enhancing the impact of cardiac arrest therapies. We recognize your contributions to the resuscitation community and thank you for joining us on our life-saving mission. The Citizen CPR Foundation is grateful to our industry partners for their ongoing and generous support, as well as their contributions to improving outcomes. We are incredibly fortunate to have some celebrated advocate champions from the European resuscitation community joining us today. We will get to our esteemed guests following a handful of brief announcements. As a reminder, we would be delighted to help bring attention to bear on any important events or initiatives that you and your organizations are working on. Please contact us in advance so that we may help. You can do so simply by emailing us at info@citizencpr.org. For your first announcement, the Citizen CPR Foundation's Cardiac Arrest Survival Summit is returning once again to the great city of San Diego from November 29th through December 2nd, 2023. So mark your calendars, inform your teams, and we will keep you updated as additional details become available. Next, our peers at the Resuscitation Academy conduct extraordinary webinars, which are hosted by Dr. Tom Ray on the third Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anyone and everyone with interest in resuscitation science and implementation should make plans and participate in these webinars as a matter of routine. Please look for a link specific to these monthly calls in your post-webinar email from the foundation. As we move towards our interactive discussion, please be reminded to mute your microphones and use the chat function to capture your questions during this webcast. We ask that participants be respectful at all times and refrain from sharing any negative or degrading comments, as well as specific product and service promotions. Any images of products appearing in these webinars are for discussion purposes only and do not represent endorsement by the Citizen CPR Foundation. And now to the focus of our discussion today: World Restart a Heart Day and Shocktober. You know, what was the genesis for this idea? What are the goals of the campaign? What types of tactics and strategies have been employed? What have been the results? What types of resources are available? And how can each of us play a part? What are some ideas for action that we can all put into play in our own communities where we work and live? How about the concept of Shocktober as a month where we can improve awareness, not only of CPR, but also of defibrillators? These are just some of the questions we will discuss with our guests. To help us gain a better understanding, we are very fortunate to be joined live today by some truly awesome guests. Bernd Böttiger from the University Hospital of Cologne, Germany, who is also with the European and German Resuscitation Councils. Jason Carlyon with the Yorkshire Ambulance Service, as well as the Resuscitation Council UK, and Nadine Rott, also with the University Hospital of Cologne. Regretfully, Anna won't be able to join us, but we're absolutely delighted to have our three guests with us. And so, let's get into our interactive discussion. This is very important, and welcome to our guests. Let's see if we can get the gods of technology to cooperate with us. And there we are. And so, again, welcome to our guests. I'm absolutely thrilled to have all of you on board. So I'm going to get right into some questions here. And I'm going to kind of somewhat randomly pick on our guests to provide an initial response, and then we'll give the others a chance to reflect and add. So I'm pretty curious as to what was the origin of the Restart a Heart campaign. I think I'm going to point at Jason first. Jason, tell us, where did this idea come from?
First of all, good evening, Dave, and thanks for inviting me along. So I suspect actually Bernd is probably better placed in terms of being able to give you the information in terms of the European Parliament and the initial concept of Restart a Heart as a designated date being launched in 2013. In that particular year, though, there wasn't a great deal of activity, certainly in the UK. The way that was done was by delivery through the use of a DVD and a lesson plan that was sent to schools. And having seen that, I felt that there was more that we could do with that, and basically set about launching a Restart a Heart campaign where we delivered face-to-face training. I felt it wasn't enough to be delivering training purely virtually, and we had to instigate face-to-face training on a large-scale basis. So that was the initiation of the Yorkshire campaign in 2014, and we've run Restart a Heart every year since then, 2016 being the first year where we had international partnerships with Ambulance Victoria and some of the New Zealand ambulance services. And since that has then led on to the discussions and the introduction of World Restart a Heart as a global campaign. As I say, I think Bernd will probably give you a bit of the background around the sort of European Parliament decision to introduce this.
Let's pass it over to Bernd then.
Yeah, thank you very much. And for me, it's 10 o'clock in the night. So I say good evening or good day or good morning or good afternoon to everyone in the world. I have seen that many colleagues from all around the world are participating, which I think is really great. So congratulations already to that success. So what I can say is that Restart a Heart was born, let's say, in the brains of the people representing the European Resuscitation Council, I would say. We are the partner of the American Heart in Europe, and we are responsible for research and for guidelines in cardiac arrest and cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And since we know that cardiac arrest is the third leading cause of death in so-called developed countries, and the whole number of deaths comes close to all deaths by all types of cancer together. So we really have a big problem. And in 2012, the European Resuscitation Council was thinking that research is not enough. We need a public campaign. And then we approached the European Parliament and we asked members of the European Parliament to give us signatures to support a European Cardiac Arrest Awareness Day or week. And this was more or less the start of the European Restart a Heart Day, which, as Jason mentioned, was first then established in 2013. And it is always on October 16 or in the weeks before or after October 16, not only by chance, is also the World Anesthesia Day. And I'm an anesthesiologist, and resuscitation is also very much related to anesthesia. So that was the origin. And then we spread this all over Europe under the umbrella of the European Resuscitation Council. And we have 32 national resuscitation councils in different countries in Europe, and all did some activities on October 16 and around since 2013, as we already heard from UK, from Jason. And then we said, this is very successful in Europe, and we approached the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, representing all 7 councils on resuscitation, including the American Heart, the Canadians, the South Americans, the Africans, the Asians, these New Zealand and Australasians, and the Europeans. This is the whole worldwide network, and they were in favor of having of moving the European activity to a worldwide activity. And then since 2018, we have the World Restart a Heart Day. And I have the pleasure to chair, under the umbrella of the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, the World Restart a Heart Group, together with Professor Andrew Lockie, who is unfortunately not able to join us tonight. And one last sentence. World Restart a Heart and the activities around are most important, because we all know if someone is collapsing because the heart stops and there is no blood flow and no oxygen coming to the brain starts to die after 3 to 5 minutes. The brain starts to die. The emergency medical services, however, only come after 8 minutes, 10 minutes, and maybe later. And in most of the cases, they are coming too late, despite that they are in many countries well organized. Mm-hmm. And here there is the possibility that we can bridge with 2 hands the time until the EMS is arriving. We only need to reperfuse the brain and pump blood to the brain. In most cases, in adults, there is enough oxygen in the lungs and in the other parts of the body. You only need to push the heart very hard and very fast, and that will help the brain to survive and the whole body to survive.
Excellent. I think, a well-educated public that is not only trained to respond, but willing to respond is essential. And so I see World Restart a Heart Day as a significant opportunity to deliver hands-on training, as well as help affect behavioral change amongst our citizenry, where they become willing participants in our effort to get hands on chest earlier and reduce time to first defibrillation. Nadine, would you like to provide us with your reflection on, the genesis and origin of World Restart a Heart Day?
Hello, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I think my colleagues already made it quite clear that it came from a European idea. And this year we are celebrating the 10-year anniversary of this creation of the Cardiac Arrest Awareness Week. So in Europe this year we are focusing on this. For me, I only joined the campaign when it was already globally. So for me, the biggest change in the years that I have been involved has been the situation with the pandemic, because suddenly we had to rethink everything that we were doing and had to figure out how to keep this life-saving awareness campaign alive during a pandemic where face-to-face training wasn't possible.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we all have a significant appreciation for, the effects of the global pandemic on our efforts to improve outcomes. I think there's been a significant setback, whether you're talking about resuscitation-related research, training, bystander CPR rates. It certainly dealt a significant blow. So I appreciate the reflection there. And that's actually a pretty decent segue into the next line of discussion. And that's, I'd ask for some additional granularity in regards to the primary goal of the campaign and what's been the progress to date. What are the indicators of success? Where have we done exceptionally well versus, oh, that was a bit of a disappointment. Maybe we need to adjust and try that again. And I'll kind of just open it up to the three of you for one of you to step in and take that question on initially.
I'm happy to take that if you like, Dave, first of all.
Please.
So I think in terms of the primary goal, clearly the primary goal is to raise awareness, inspire confidence, and provide people with the confidence and competence to act in the most serious medical emergency, and that's to perform CPR until the arrival of EMS. And I think this is backed up clearly by the chain of survival. The chain of survival has these links in it, but importantly, there's only one link where it's actually really dependent upon advanced care, and the preceding links can be influenced by bystanders. And this is the key messaging to get out to people, is that the public can have the biggest impact in terms of chance of survival for people having a cardiac arrest out of hospital. And in terms of measures of success, I think certainly for us in the UK, I can point to figures from some of the confidence and competence surveys that we've done as a result of Restart a Heart. And I think numbers, first of all, so the numbers of people that have been trained, 2021, so over 5 million people across the world trained as part of World Restart a Heart. The confidence survey in the UK showed a pre-training confidence of 44% for people willing to or able to recognise a cardiac arrest and perform CPR. And unsurprisingly, this rose to 86% post-training. And that's then reflected in the bystander CPR figures that we see. So we've seen, certainly within our service, and it's mirrored in other services that have had a similar kind of activity, we've seen the bystander CPR figures rise significantly, and we're currently reporting about 70% of cardiac arrests where bystander CPR are performed. And ultimately, what we hope to have an effect on, of course, is survival to discharge. And we do see that. We see that in some of the case studies that we're gathering. We are seeing people who have been resuscitated by people who've been trained on Restart a Heart Day. And that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? We're teaching people to deliver CPR, and they're performing it and saving lives.
Thank you, Jason. And safe to assume that those 5 million persons trained, that wouldn't have happened without, the World Restart a Heart concept. Yes, affirmative. Okay. I'm looking for reflections and additional commentary from our other guests.
Yeah, I would like to add some numbers to what Jason has said, because you can clearly see that the World Restart a Heart campaign is growing. So in the first year, in 2018, we had 675,000 people trained. And then in 2019, we already had 5.4 million people trained and 206 million people reached via social media. Then, of course, for the pandemic years, we have a problem gathering these numbers. So this is maybe something that we can work on, because it's not that easy to compare the numbers for social media. We had really great campaigns with My Song Can Save Life or stuff like this, but we can't really tell how much these social media campaigns helped.
Thank you. Excellent. Bernd.
Thank you very much. I would like to recall a little bit what Jason and Nadine already said. So these 5.4 million was just in 1 year. This was the year before the pandemic in 2019. And in this year, we already, as Nadine said, reached more than 200 million via social media. And this, I guess, was increased during the pandemic year. So we have at least reached several hundreds of millions of lay people worldwide, and maybe a billion, I don't know. And this is most important, since we know from a very nice study from Denmark, but also from other countries, more or less the same results in studies. In Denmark, they started within a 10-year period, started in 2001 until 2010, a national campaign to increase the bystander CPR rates, so to bridge the time until the emergency medical service arrive. And they started with lay resuscitation rates before EMS arrival of around 20%, and they ended up with 60%. And with this intervention, and by the way, one part of this intervention was to educate school children in cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Maybe we can come back to this later. But this increase in bystander CPR rates resulted in a 3-time increase in survival following out of hospital cardiac arrest. 3-time increase in survival in a deadly entity within 10 years. This is much better than anything we can do in the hospital, than anything we can do in the ambulance. There is no drug, not even in other entities, that has such a power. So 2 hands is extremely powerful. And the motto of the World Restart a Heart, by the way, is check, call, compress. Check for signs of lives, call the emergency services, and compress. Start in the middle of the chest in adults 5 to 6 centimeters with 100 to 120 per minute. And don't interrupt, and do this until the EMS is arriving. So check, call, compress is the message. And the effect is 3 times more survivors, 3 times more survivors in the 3rd most important killer in developed countries.
Excellent. You know, I think fear continues to play a big role in the average person's reluctance to act. And, you know, Katie Dainty and her team did a nice job with an ILCOR statement within the last several months that talked about bystanders versus lay responders and lay rescuers. And I think it's beyond nuance in that, you know, we want people to be, as Vinay has coined the term, tristanders instead of bystanders. Don't be an onlooker. You know, don't wait for the help, be the help. There's a lot of kind of sound bites that feed into that notion, where we're looking to empower people to use their hands to help another individual in their ultimate time of need. And while it sounds easy, we know that it isn't, and it takes a great deal of effort. It takes a World Restart a Heart Day and, you know, National CPR Weeks, and, you know, kind of an everyday kind of concept or effort to improve citizen preparedness and willingness. And I think based on the information you're telling me, and what I understand is that the World Restart a Heart Day is an excellent example that we should all be capitalizing on as yet another excuse to engage our fellow neighbors and citizens in this life-saving campaign that, truly claims the lives of far too many people, knowing that particularly primary VF cardiac arrest is, something likened to acute anaphylaxis, an allergic reaction. If we can treat it very quickly with some simple measures, people live. So outstanding. There's an excellent question waiting in chat, but I'm gonna defer on that for a few moments. I really appreciate the responses.
Dave, may I just add something at this point? Just
Please.
reflecting on what you've just said and what something that Bernd mentioned about school children. And I think that you've mentioned there, talking about fear and this unwillingness to act, and I like this term tri-standers. And I think what we've got to realise is that this campaign is aiming to change culture. It's a societal change. You've got to bear in mind that a lot of older people in the community will probably never have had this training, or if they have, if they haven't, they're probably unlikely to help anyway, just given their age. And I think what we're trying to do and what we're seeing is the benefits of training school children, because you're influencing that societal change right from a very young age, and you've got people then who are equipped with the skills and have had that fear challenged early on.
Yeah, Jason, thank you very much for reminding us about, the targeted training for the population of school-aged children. Children seem to have a robust uptake on cause-related kind of initiatives. They're extremely teachable when it comes to, comparing to like old guys like me. They're much more receptive, and I think preparing an entire generation of rescue-minded individuals certainly has a great deal of credibility. And I think that's where we should all be making good investments, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. All right, again, there's
absolutely. And in Denmark, school children, mandatory nationwide education of school children was one of the success parts of increasing survival by threefold. And we are just working, and it's in the final stage under the umbrella of the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, on a concept for school children education worldwide. And this is also something that everyone in this group who are listening, and including ourselves, can do on October 16 or before or around. Go to the next school and educate school children in CPR. You can start even in the kindergarten with check and call. They are not able to compress, but they understand the necessity of compressions, and they can even tell adults how to do compressions. And when they are around 10 or 12 years old, they can do check, call, and compress because they have the physical power to do so. And they don't have fear. They have some kind of national altruism. And if you do it before high puberty, it is like swimming or bicycling or playing an instrument for them. They will never forget. And that is the way how we put it into the families and into the whole public. And at the age of 16 or 18, we then educate them also with ventilation and with AED. But the most important things is check, call, compress, because with the compressions, the brain will get blood again and oxygen and will not die. And we also use the school children, and that's another suggestion, I would say. If they have been trained, we tell them, hey, you now know how to save a life. The only thing you need is 2 hands. please go home and within the next 2 weeks, tell 10 additional people how this works, put their names on a list and bring it back to school. So we use the school children as multiplayers in their families, because they will then educate their father, mother, sisters, brothers, and all other family members. And that's most important, because 60, maybe 70% of all cardiac arrests occur at home. And our goal is to have at least one lifesaver in every family, in every home.
And you can use World Restart a Heart Day as an excuse to do something no matter on what scale. So we just heard you could go to a school and teach the school children. If you want to scale it up, in the last year in Germany, we used it as an excuse to do a petition for our government to make it mandatory to make Schulchildren education. And we gathered 85,000 signatures and got it to the government. Or if you want to do something on a smaller scale, if you can't go to the school, just take an empty plastic bottle if you do not have a mannequin or a pillow and go to your next door neighbor and teach them how to do CPR. You can start on this really small scale and do something.
I love it. I love excuses, by the way. Excuses to do good deeds, help others to, empower their hands to save the lives of others. Boy, I love it. Keep the excuses coming, right? And, again, I think it's our job as individuals, as well as the organizations that we represent, to take advantage of this opportunity and do something, right? The error here is like not performing CPR on somebody who needs it, right? The error here is to do nothing with this information. Even, attempts are better than sitting back and waiting for somebody else. I mean, oftentimes I think the resuscitation community is doing armchair medicine, waiting for somebody else to make plans. And really the philosophy, at least in my opinion, is that if it's going to be, it's up to me, right? And if we all kind of embrace that, we can become force multipliers and really contribute to, that culture change, adding hands-on training and willingness to rescue. This is a very good discussion, and I'm very appreciative. This could be a Jason question, at least for starts. And there's some tactical related questions in the chat that we'll get to in our Q&A period, which is coming up soon. Tell us a little bit about the types of tactics that have been used in Europe and, New Zealand and Australia, places like that, Germany. Tell us what tactics have been generally employed and which ones have been like really, wow, that was great, versus, oh, that wasn't so wonderful. Jason, you're on.
Thanks, Dave. Well, I think the first thing to say is that there's a number of different ways that people can be involved in Restart a Heart, and both Nadine and Bernd have touched on this, and that is it's individuals versus organisations. So what's worked really well in the UK, we started as an ambulance service delivering this, and I appreciate the ambulance service, EMS services around the world are different, but as an ambulance service, we coordinate the activity for Restart a Heart training. So for example, this year, on October the 14th, in fact, for us, we will go into 140 schools across Yorkshire with about 600 people volunteering. Now, when we started back in 2014 and we put out the call for volunteers, we weren't sure what kind of sign-up we'd get. We weren't sure what kind of sign-up from schools we'd get. But what it's shown is, firstly, there's an appetite from schools for the training, which is actually great. It's greater now because CPR, after years of campaigning, is now on the school curriculum in the UK, or certainly at least in England. So it's now greater that the desire for schools to have us in. But we're parts of the community. We are an ambulance service that, and certainly in Yorkshire, we serve a big region, and we're a central part of that community. And what better way to sort of embed yourself in that community than actually be the people that are going in, delivering the training to the people in the area where you live. So a lot of our volunteers are going into schools near to where they live and probably teaching friends and family, children in those schools. So what's been really successful, individuals delivering their own thing, organizations such as ambulance services delivering on a large scale. So we'll teach about 40,000 children this year. But also private first aid training providers. So there's an opportunity to think about private first aid training providers as well. How do you get them involved in the campaign, recruit them? We've got 116 private first aid training providers across the UK signed up to take part this year. So think about who you can get involved, think about how you get them involved, and that's face-to-face versus virtual training. It doesn't all have to be face-to-face. I think somebody's noted a question in the chat about stadiums. Absolutely. We work in all the football clubs, at soccer clubs, at matches in October, and we were delivering CPR training. We'll have videos on the big screen for anyone attending that game. So I think in answer to your question, Dave, there is no one solution. There's a lot of different ways in which you can address this, but they all together work really well. Not one on its own will suffice.
Well stated. Local situations demand local solutions, and every community is a little bit different, right? Now, Jason, there's something different about, at least from where I'm seated, about the ambulance services in the UK specifically, and those here in the United States. And we've got a pretty large audience here in the US. And you use things like a community resuscitation officer kind of concept, where people's focus, or at least a large part of their focus, is on engaging the citizenry. Could you take just 1 minute to either confirm this notion that I have, or say, well, David, you're terribly mistaken?
So ambulance services do tend to have small engagement teams, and that's what my role is within Yorkshire. I'm community engagement manager. However, for Restart Heart particularly, we are heavily reliant, and I would say pretty much majorly reliant on volunteer support. So as an organisation, we have about 6,000 members of staff, but we are also supported by about 1,100 volunteers who provide additional support as first responders, but are also keen to be involved in delivery of training. So the people who deliver our training for Restart a Heart Day and throughout the year are volunteers from our staff group and from our volunteer cohort. And honestly, we couldn't deliver it without people being willing to give their time up. And I think this is my point. It really says a lot about the cause, because I can't think of anything else where I could ask ambulance staff to give their time up, and they would be so willing to do so.
Interesting. And once again, collaboration reveals itself. Multi-agency collaboration reveals itself as kind of a key ingredient to success. Bernd and Nadine, what say you? What would you like to add?
I would like to add the social media and digital aspect of this. I was talking about the pandemic, and suddenly we had to rethink everything. So in the year before the pandemic, we did a big flash mob with a marching band and a lot of TV stations. And then suddenly we had the pandemic and couldn't do anything like this. So for example, in the first pandemic year, we did a campaign of My Song Can Save Lives, where we asked famous singers and artists all over the world that had already had a song with the correct beat for resuscitation. We asked them to tweet to their fans about their song, tell them this is the correct beat, so listen to the song again and inform yourself about CPR. So this was a really nice way to engage people that would never come to the homepage of the Resuscitation Council or something like this, because it was your favorite singer that was telling you about this. And we had stars like Andrew Lloyd Webber or the Vienna Philharmonics or David Garrett take part. And then last year we did CPR Saved My Life as a social media campaign. So we asked people that were survivors, or in some countries also the people that saved them, to tell their story on social media so that you could see faces of people that survived. So you could have an emotional approach, and also you could see that it really can hit everyone. It doesn't matter which gender or which age. So social media is also a big aspect, and we shouldn't forget about social media when we can go back to face-to-face training.
I hear your message loud and clear, and that was exceptional. Thank you. Bernd?
I would like to add that the idea for my song Can Save Lives was coming from Nadine, and it was extremely successful. And what we already have heard from all of us, more or less, is that you can do many, many different things to reach the goal to increase the rate of bystander CPR. And maybe we should not use bystander anymore, as you mentioned before, and it just came in my mind. We should probably say by compressors. By compressors, because compression is, you need to be the heart of the victim. So if you use your hands to pump the blood, that is the most important thing. Check, call, compress by compressors. And the World Restarter Heart is totally inclusive. So you can do what you want in your organization, in your community, in your school. School children education and CPR, by the way, is called Kids Save Lives. Kids Save Lives. Please search for that in the internet. You will get a lot of information and suggestions what you can do. So we are totally inclusive. And one of the most important things where I'm proud of is that we also convinced the International Federation of the Red Cross to participate in ILCO World Restarter Heart. And already in 2019, they sent it out toolkits, how to build a mannequin out of a PET water bottle with a t-shirt over it. And you can use it all over the world. And they have sent it out toolkits in 192 out of 194 countries in the world. So we are only not having World Restarter Heart in 2 very small countries representing small islands. So we are totally inclusive. You can do what you want, either on October 16 or in the weeks before and in the weeks after. Everyone can do something. The message is the only thing you can do wrong is if you are not doing anything.
I
Well
would like
stated.
to add something really small, because you said we should search the internet for Kids Save Lives. You can also search the hashtag World Restarter Heart, because that is the international hashtag that we use every year. So there you can see at least all the digital campaigns that we did, and you can find all the information, hashtag World Restarter Heart.
And if you're doing anything around World Restarter Heart this year, please, and put it in the internet and on the social media, please also use the hashtag World Restarter Heart, because then we are able to gather some numbers from all over the world and publish them next year.
Exceptional. Exceptional. Strong messages here. Well done. Well done. I'm watching the clock. We're doing well. I'd like to transition a little bit here. And I know that Ambulance Victoria owns a great deal of this. But, they're looking at, they coined this term Shocktober, right? And so how can we use World Restarter Heart Day and October as a month of increased awareness, and combine talking about CPR and sensitizing our citizens to the value of CPR, but given the value of rapid defibrillation, how can we integrate the AED messaging here? And I suspect that the three of you have already done this to a certain extent. So one of you step forward as the initial responder to this question, please.
I'm happy to speak again, Dave, if nobody else is.
Yeah, you're introverted, apparently, Jason.
Always have been. So yeah, this campaign of Shocktober, which is notionally a campaign basically to raise awareness of the location of and how to use defibrillators, clearly goes hand in hand with the Restart a Heart campaign. You know, we've talked earlier about the chain of survival. You've just alluded to the significance of defibrillators in the saving of lives. And it's absolutely crucial as part of the campaign that we don't forget the messaging around defibs. Yes, it's absolutely crucial that we get people performing CPR before we arrive, but we also need defibs out in communities. They also need to be registered. So a big part of the Shocktober campaign is about making sure that defibs that are in communities or in buildings are registered with the sort of registry in that particular country. And I think, you know, we talked about it earlier, Dave. I talk about this sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs when it comes to resuscitation. And for me, you know, that this whole thing about how we improve the chances of survival is making sure that we've got that base level, that foundation set correctly. And that's making sure that we have people equipped to deliver CPR, but we also have the necessary number of defibs out there and we know where they are. And that's how we reach the top of that pyramid, and that, you know, we reach the actualization of the great survival rates that we want.
Excellent. Nadine and Bernd, weigh in.
Well, I would like to repeat that the most important thing is cardiac compressions, because as long as you compress the thorax, as long the brain cannot die. So the message or the motto of World Restart Heart is all over the world is check, call, and compress. And please do not run away to take an AED and leave the patient alone. The most important thing is cardiac compressions. This is the thing that stops the patient dying. In my country, and maybe it's the same in your countries, only around 20 or maybe 25% of all victims have ventricular fibrillation when the EMS is arriving. So that is another argument. Don't leave the patient. Only if you have 3 or 4 people around the patient, think about an AED and go away from the patient for an AED. Don't delay cardiac compressions, not even by 10 seconds, because we know that every delay is dangerous for the patient, as is every interruption of cardiac compressions. And what we also know is that if I know several people who had the lay people who had AED in their mind, and in a case of cardiac arrest, they run away to the train station to take an AED. And that is totally the wrong approach. So we need to put into the minds of the lay people, please
Don't stop.
Compressions, don't stop them, don't interrupt them, and if there are enough people around, someone else can take an AED. And if you have seen lay people, how they deal with an AED, lay people, not educated, they interrupt cardiac compressions for 2, 3, 4 minutes, and that is deadly for the patient. So I personally think in very remote areas you should have an AED, but you need to be educated. And in our country, we recommend AEDs in particular for so-called first responder systems. So we tell the lay people, please check, call, compress. And then we have first responders coming earlier than the emergency medical service, and they then have an AED and they use the AED. So AEDs can also be dangerous if people are thinking wrong. Therefore, our message is check, call, compress. And therefore, a suggestion from my side would also be, not only to think about Shocktober, but also to think about Presstober.
Yeah. Yeah, your message is coming through loud and clear. And well done. Much appreciated. I am looking at the time, and I'm looking at this question that was put in by Vanessa, which I think this is the $1 million question for a lot of the folks in our participant community here is, how do you recommend getting started with getting buy-in from your community to support this initiative? This individual scheduled a meeting with their city council in November. They're looking for some words of wisdom.
I'll chip in there, Dave. So
Yeah.
certainly from my experience,
I'm surprised it's you again, Jace.
Certainly from my experience in that first year, we just took a leap of faith. So we reached out to schools, we reached out to volunteers, and in terms of getting buy-in, I think, I don't know which community we're talking about here. Are we talking about the community of people that you want to teach, or the community, the sort of EMS community, for want of a better
Where you
description?
live is
Yeah.
the community they're talking about.
So it's about messaging. You know, Nadine talked earlier about some of the social media stuff, and the social media campaign. I can't reiterate strongly enough how the messaging used on social media gets this across. Everyone's using social media now. And Nadine talked about the CPR Saved My Life campaign, which we had run the year previous, or a couple of years previous, here in Yorkshire, really successfully. And it's those case studies, it's those survivor case studies which reinforce the messaging to the public, because you've got to make it real. You've got to make it relatable. And that's one of the barriers to people being willing and people learning, is they can't relate to it. You know, and we know about the percentage of cardiac arrests that occur in the home. And it's getting that message across that this could be one of your family members. So that's how I would get the buy-in. It's selling it as, what would you do? You know, if this was your family, what would you do in this situation? Would you know what to do?
Excellent suggestion, right? And one that I've used on more than one occasion in dealing with decision makers and elected officials. You know, oftentimes they'll say, oh, that was really great information, but we just don't have the resources to do anything about this. And my rebuttal has always been, well, if it was your wife or your husband or your son or daughter, Mr. or Mrs. elected official, are you still willing to say that? So excellent. Bernd, Nadine, recommendations for getting buy-in, please.
In Cologne, in Germany, which is the home city from Nadine and myself, we started in 2009, so more than 10 years ago. We invited school children in a small town hall. We had 400 school children there, and we trained them, and we showed them how easy it is to save a life with check, call, compress. We invited the press, the televisions from Germany, and we have been in all major news in the evening with this event, because it is so touching when you see that small school children can save a life, and the message which is going out is very clear to everyone. Life saving is totally easy. Children can do it, and also adults can do it. And as a next step, we then invited the mayor of the city, and we trained the whole staff of the mayor of the city in the city hall in how to do CPR, and that convinced them to support us. And then we invited school children to our hospital, which is, by the way, a big and very good marketing for the hospital. And we trained them in the hospital in CPR, and they are all totally enthusiastic, including the teachers. We also went to schools, and now we're establishing a first responder system in Cologne with the support from the whole community.
Exceptional.
I want to come back was what Jason said. If you have a survivor or someone who saved someone, they are with you at some event that you are doing. This is really special. So we had a World Restart a Heart talk at the ERC Congress in Antwerp a few weeks ago. And there we had someone who survived and the savior, and they joined us in the talk. And this was so emotional. And for all of us who are already in the topic, it also reminded us why we are doing this. And for Cologne, we at the beginning sometimes invited a student that saved the life of another student during the school break. And when she was there at an event and told her story personally, and such a young girl, this is also really emotional and catches people.
And the World Restart a Hard session from ERC Congress in Antwerp this summer is on the web, and you can see it on the ERC website, and you will receive further information on ERC or ILCOR websites, and you can see all these touching moments that Nadine already mentioned.
Yeah, very good. Very, very good. And we've included information regarding World Restart a Heart Day as part of our post webinar communication. So I'm going to pull up slides again here and look to wrap up our conversation. Now let me just fast forward here, and we'll get wrapped up and we'll get folks on. Let's go in here. There we go. And so, ideas for action. A lot of it is based around this very nice pictograph that Ambulance Victoria has created, and it involves, getting citizens to participate in their crowdsourcing app, Good Sam, looking at AED registries, integrating community presentations into what's kind of already going on in the community, citizen CPR training, and so forth. And so, moving forward, I'd say the biggest mistake we could all make is to do nothing, right? Action required. And I think, fostering a culture of action within our communities around cardiac arrest and, time sensitive and life-threatening emergencies it's our civic duty and moral obligation to continue our diligent efforts. Now, in closing, I wanted to remind everyone to join us again next month. Should all things work out according to plan, we're going to discuss planning nationally and implementing locally, translating the Institute of Medicine's recommendations for regional and local implementation with our dear friend, Dr. Tom Ofterheide. So I hope to see many of you next month. And please remember to share your feedback and ideas. You can do so in the chat function right now. These are for you. They're not for us. We'd love to hear if these are beneficial for you and what you'd like to see moving forward. My heartfelt thanks to our three extraordinary guests for taking time out of their night to join us, and profound thanks always to our behind the scenes team that keeps all of the technology working. Thank all of you for joining us and the work that I know that you're doing every day. On behalf of the Citizen CPR Foundation, I hope to see you next month. I am David Hiltz, and I wish you a good night.